So happy to be with you all. I have to say, to begin with, that I'm not a particularly religious person. What I think is that what we need to be is spiritual. Religion is a formality. It's something you do to please God and so on. Religion is not the essence of what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about spirituality. Of all the groups of people in this world who are seeking money, fame, power, sex, importance, anything that you might name, no one has ever achieved what he is looking for except one group. Howard Hughes, who was the wealthiest man in the world, just a week before he died, a newspaper reporter asked him, "Are you happy?" He said, "No, I can't say I'm happy." Even his tone of voice said it. But there is one group of people who have set out to find God, and they have found something real. Religion doesn't talk about finding God. It talks about being obedient to Him, doing holy things. True spirituality means, well, let me put it this way. Saint Jean Vianney, a great saint in France, once said, if you knew how much God loves you, you would die of joy. The search that all of us have, you know, in the Indian scriptures, the great Shankaracharya said that God is Sat-Chit-Ananda, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. This is our nature, and this explains all human motivation. Everybody in the world is seeking two things, one to avoid pain, and the other to find happiness. And in this sense, you can say that everybody in the world is on the spiritual path. In fact, one disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda once asked him, will I ever fall from the spiritual path? Yogananda answered, how could you? Everyone in the world is on the spiritual path. Everybody is seeking happiness. But the thing is that they usually, in fact almost always, seek it in ways that in the end will be a disappointment to them. There's a story about an American in boot camp in the Second World War. And he was going around the grounds picking up paper. This isn't it. This isn't it. Finally, he began to think, well, this guy better see the camp psychiatrist. So he went into the camp psychiatrist's office, and he was picking up papers on the table, on the desk. This isn't it. This isn't it. Finally, the psychiatrist couldn't get him to say anything else. And so finally, he recommended him for a medical discharge. When that discharge was given into his hands, the man said, this is it. Well, this is what all of us are seeking. We are seeking to be discharged from those things which cause us pain and suffering. All of us want to understand how we can find happiness, and only one group of people in the world have actually found that goal. Those are the people we call the saints. This is not something that it doesn't require a special kind of person. He may not be a very holy kind of person. Sometimes somebody who is a very unholy kind of person finally decides, I've had it with suffering and I want to find God. In the Bhagavad Gita, a great scripture of India, it says, even the worst of sinners, if he steadfastly calls to me and meditates on me, quickly comes to me. One of the things that we must get away from is sin consciousness. You are not a sinner. You are a child of God. And your sins are something temporary. They're mistakes that you have made. I remember when I was 21, I decided I wanted to become a hermit. And I thought, well, who ever heard of a hermit who smokes? And so I decided I had to give up smoking. Well, it was like Mark Twain, who said, smoking's the easiest thing in the world to give up. I've done it 1,000 times. And so every time I would go off smoking, my luncheon coffee that the cigarette tasted so good, and I would go back to it. But the important thing, and I was very lucky in understanding this, I never said, I have failed. I always said, I haven't yet succeeded. I think that in true religion there is no room for beating your breast and saying how bad you are. Mind you, if you say you're a sinner, then you have all the excuse you need to go on sinning, don't you? You want to understand that you have the potential. And this is another very interesting point, and I keep referring to the Indian philosophy because it is the most practical in human terms and in terms of human upliftment. I remember there was this one man in Australia. I was giving a lecture there, and he said to me, well, I'm an atheist, and what have you got to say about God that I can understand and respect? And I said, well, why don't you think of God as the highest potential you can imagine for yourself? And he sort of was stunned by this answer, and finally he said, well, I can live with that. Well, the thing is that we all have a higher and a lower potential. I remember many years ago when I was desperately seeking truth, and it occurred to me that everybody in the world was me in potential. I could have been the worst person in the world if the right circumstances, the right misunderstandings and everything had taken me in that direction. And I became very much afraid of how vulnerable human nature is. And I realized I needed help. And so I called deeply to God. I remember, well, I had sought truth all my life, really from childhood. And first I wanted to be an astronomer. And then I thought to be a social reformer. I wanted to have a kind of religion that would help everybody. And I thought of music and the arts and so on. But always I thought, without God, this won't work. And I had tried to avoid God. When my mother was bearing me in her womb, she used to pray, this first child I give to you. But I have to say I did my best to live without God. But I found it just wasn't possible. I looked over history, and every single movement that really had a strong positive impact on the human race, every single one was a religious one or a spiritual one. What influences Newton had, or Darwin, or all those materialistic scientists, compared to Buddha, or Jesus Christ, or Krishna, or the great spiritual reformers of history? Not one. There is something in human nature that needs to aspire to something. Without aspiration, we are no better than the animals. And so you see, and this is another theme in the Bhagavad Gita, which I referred to a few moments ago, there is an upward pull in all of us, and there is also a downward pull. And I know that the religions and the societies and so on try to tell you what to do, but you don't need to be told if you just try to listen and watch your own nature. When you try to hurt somebody, you feel hurt. When you're jealous or selfish, you feel hurt. When you don't live according to your own highest expectations of yourself, you're the one who suffers. And there is within every human being this upward pull and the downward pull. You can see it in the very posture of people. People who live downwardly with their energy moving downward. Yes, in the physical body. They look down, they look heavy, they sit heavy, their words are sort of coarse. Everything about them has a downward pull. Whereas if you understand that there is something in you which aspires upward, heaven isn't above you, literally. Heaven is above you in your own self. That part of your nature that raises your consciousness toward the brain, toward here, toward the higher aspects. Think of your feeling. Feeling is in the heart, isn't it? When you have a lovesick swain, let's say, he never says, I have a broken knee. He will often say, I have a broken heart. It's in the heart that we feel. And what we find is that when that energy from the heart goes upward, then we feel better. And when it goes downward, we feel worse. So religion in the New Age needs to be taken out of the category of belief. It isn't enough to believe things. People used to believe the world was flat. That didn't make it so. There are many things that we can believe that are not true. What we need is experience. In fact, we need to bring science and religion together in this, that there is no opposition between beliefs, yes, but between experience, no. We have to understand that when you think right, feel right, live right, then everything goes better for you. And one of the wonderful things, because I'm the founder of about 8 communities now worldwide, and this is our 42nd year of existence, it is enough of an experiment, you might say, that in these 40 years we've been able to see people in their thousands come and go. But those people who have lived according to these teachings, they always are happy, they're always at peace, they're always generous. People who go against those teachings, they themselves suffer. Remember, religion is a matter of what you yourself experience from life. You've got to base your religion on what you have experienced, of what you want. Nobody else can tell you what you should want in this world, but you do know in your heart that this thought is universal. You want to avoid pain, and you want to find happiness. Now, to some people, happiness is power and so on. But once they've gotten it, they don't have it. The only happy people in this world are those people who hope to achieve what they're looking for in the path that they're following. But in the one path where they have sought God, you find absolute agreement, to the point where they're willing, happy, honored, even to sacrifice their lives to help other people to come to that teaching. I remember back in when I was 22, and this was 1948, and I had reached the point of desperately wanting to know God. And it occurred to me, maybe I'm going crazy. I had never heard of people knowing God. I hadn't read religious things. I'd been sort of anti-religion and anti-religious. And I didn't know that there were people who actually communed with God. My mother would talk about it sometimes, and talk about the miracles that saints performed and so on. And I'd say, come off it, Mother. No, that's just nonsense. But so I didn't know anything. But when I came to that point where I desperately needed to know what life was all about, I remember I was in Charleston, South Carolina at that time, and I took a long walk out into the evening, into the night, and I said, if there's a God, what must he be? Well, he can't be a policeman, he can't be a judge. It's got to be something more. I realized that he had to be consciousness, and that my consciousness was, I was conscious because I was a part of his consciousness. This was the whole Vedanta philosophy that just came to me as I was going on that walk that night. And I said, if this is true, if he is consciousness, if I am conscious only because he is conscious, if I am more aware of that higher consciousness when I'm in tune, and less aware when I drink too much or gossip too much or am restless or whatever, then it's possible to be more aware and not less aware. And if this is true, then the only goal of my life has to be to find God. And I thought, am I going crazy? Nobody ever had done this as far as I knew. And I remember going out almost desperately into the country. I thought maybe I'm too sophisticated, too much of a city dweller. I need to get close to nature. And I went upstate New York, and I went into the countryside at Indian Lake, and I used to look at the dewdrops on a leaf and think how beautiful it is. And I thought, but I can't feel it. It's out there. It isn't here. I felt that I was like a motor working on only one cylinder. And I thought, what can I do? And I decided that I would give my life to seeking him. I didn't know how. I had read I didn't know anything of the Indian scriptures, but I read a Short World Bible, as it was called, in my mother's library. And in that it talked about how it is possible to commune. And to do so, you have to meditate. Well, meditation, I didn't know what that was all about either. But I used to sit sort of cross-legged and cross-eyed on my bed and try to find something. My father had been posted to Egypt, Cairo, and my mother was to join him. This was the most wonderful thing in my life. The day that I put Mother on that ship to go join Dad in Cairo, I went uptown New York, and I entered a bookstore called Doubleday Duran, and having read a smattering of the Indian teachings, I went there and looked at what they had, and I found Autobiography of a Yogi. And there was something about the cover of that book that just somehow resonated with me. And I bought that book, and it just completely changed my life. I'd been against miracles because I thought my rational mind thought they were not possible, but I had always doubted my rational mind. I used, even as a child, to play games with myself. I would say to my mother, for example, because I didn't like spinach. So I'd say, "Oh, Mother, don't give me spinach today. Spinach is green, and green is the color of envy, and you don't want your boy growing up to be envious." I knew that was false reasoning, and I enjoyed using reason falsely, simply to show myself, convince myself that I would not find truth through reason. But I had only reason to go by. If I'd gone by love, it would have been much easier. But I didn't know about that. And yet, through reason, I did find what I was looking for. And when I read that book, page 8, Lahiri Mahashai, the guru of my guru's guru, it doesn't mean anything to you maybe, but the thing is that suddenly he materialized in a wheat field. To me, absolute bilge. But because he said it, I believed it. I was completely won, not by what he said, not by the stories he told, but by that absolutely pure consciousness that showed in every reaction that he had. His book is full of divine bliss because he is so perfectly blissful in his own nature. Do read that book. It's the greatest book I've ever read. But anyway, I took the next bus, New York to Los Angeles, where he was living. And the first words I said to him were, "I want to be your disciple." He accepted me that day. And I can say that this was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I had never heard of the word guru. In fact, I didn't know the word of yoga. I didn't know any of the Indian terms. But I knew I desperately needed help. I had seen these people who were of all sorts of debased consciousness, high consciousness, all kinds of consciousness. I wanted to be a writer, and I used to make it a point to mix with all kinds of people that I could, just to understand human nature. And as I said earlier, I could see that these people were unhappy, miserable, depraved, and that I could see also that I could have become like that. And so when I crossed the country to meet Yogananda, I had this twofold desire. One was to find God, and the other was to help everybody to find him. Religion in the New Age, to my mind, is to understand that religion is to fulfill your own destiny. It's not a question of doing something because society tells you to, not doing something because you belong to a particular church and they tell you this is what you should do. It's a deep impulse within each person. But you know, just as when you try to thread a needle, If the threads are going in different directions, you can't get that thread through. And so here we have this aspiration, which is universal. Everybody has it. But the thing is, the threads are not all pointed that way. And so we have conflicting desires, conflicting attachments. We have this need to learn to bring ourselves into alignment with our own true aspirations. And this is what true religion should be all about. It should be experiential. Beliefs don't matter, but your experience of life. That, I think there is many types of Christianity as there are Christians, because everybody's experience of God, of truth, of life is unique. This is one of the absolutely wonderful things about the spiritual teachings. God is ever new. In every human being, that divine bliss is expressed in a particular way. In every human being, that aspiration expresses itself in a particular way. Don't join any organization that tries to make you into a mirror image of everybody else. Everybody has to find his truth for himself. And yet you find that those who know God, each one is unique. Everybody else is imitative. Saints bring out their own nature, their own divine self. But in every one, it is different. People are always saying, well, how could this one be a saint? He's not like that one. No, every one is different. This is the beauty of it all. When you are seeking the higher self, you will find that you're stripping away all those things that are your own false self-definitions. You aren't an American. You aren't French or Italian or Indian or anything. You aren't white or black or whatever other color. You aren't a man or a woman. You aren't a person with particular self-definitions. What you need to do is get rid of those self-definitions. The more you can reduce yourself to the thought of zero, that I am nothing. I remember one time many years ago, I was in a church and lecturing, and there were 100 people there. And I remembered that my guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, had said to me, well, when you speak, feel that God is speaking through you. And I thought, well, why shouldn't I just shut up and let God talk? So I tried to stand there. I stood there for 2 minutes in a group of people, 100 people, all waiting for your next word. If you don't say anything, they'll think you're frozen with fear. And many people were perspiring. But I just stood there comfortably waiting for God to say something. And I finally had to say, well, he won't be speaking. I have to do it. And so this is a prayer that Yogananda said, I will reason, I will, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. So we have to do it. We have to put out the energy. But what I have discovered, now mind you, I'm talking with some experience. I've written about 140 books. I've written over 400 pieces of music. I've taken over 15,000 color slides. I've founded communities. I'm not saying this to boast. I'm saying it to make a very important point. The less you feel you are the doer, the more you will find that that inspiration can come to you, and he will be able to do things. God doesn't work through passive instruments. He works through active instruments. This is a very important point to make today, because we're surrounded by violence and hatred, and the world at the moment seems to be really going downhill. I'm sad to say it. I remember a newspaper review of a movie that I saw in India. It said, if such and such a movie wasn't violent enough for you, this one will please you. The world is sick. There is a war, however, going on up in heaven between those who are trying to find truth and joy and those who are opposed to it and living for darkness. Be an angel of light. Be a warrior of light. Be one whose life is dedicated to finding the fulfillment of all human aspiration, which is to know the bliss of your own being. It's absolutely thrilling when you feel this, to look around you and see that everybody in his own way is trying to find that same bliss. We're all children of God. We're not sinners. We're his beloved children. And have that faith that you can come out of the swirling mists of delusion and discover who you really are as a part of his consciousness. This religion is the eternal religion. It is the religion that has to be the religion in the most distant galaxy of our universe, because there is no other truth possible. Everything was dreamed by God. Everything must merge back into him in the end. This is the essence of religion. Joy to you.
Thank you to all of our donors for making it possible to share these videos and keep this channel ad-free. If you feel inspired to donate, visit ananda.org/give.